Late one night in 1993, I heard a popping outside my bedroom window. It happened at 1 a.m., so I didn't think twice about it. A few days later, I learned from one of our neighbors that Akeem's house across the street had been shot at. Bullet holes were visible in the windows for a few days. Whether it was an accident or a drive-by, I didn't know. But it wasn't like the movies. No screeching vehicles or police sirens. Just popping, like soft firecrackers. I heard it was a domestic matter. No one was killed. I never felt in danger. My parents didn't comment and reminded us to avoid them. To the best of my memory, this happened around the same time two juniors at our high school, Amy Davis and Alex Edelstein, were killed in a car crash on the 520 bridge. Amy's little sister Jen was in my grade and sat near me in Japanese class. It all just speaks to how little, prior to this as a teenager, I had thought about the gravity of death. While my father was alive, he spoke often and rather flippantly about death. In 1963, he stood on the field outside Garfield High School, near what would later be Azal's Fried Chicken. It was shortly after the PA system announced that President Kennedy had been shot. Just a handful of years later, he was in Vietnam dodging Kalashnikov rounds during the Tet Offensive. As a middle-aged dad in the 1980s, my father was hesitant to share much about his past, but he did teach me a few things. Like how, when compared to an M16 round's rotationally stable spin, the AK-47 bullet tumbled upon entry into soft tissue, exploding flesh for maximum stopping power. His generation of Japanese Americans was hardcore. They came up out of internment at Minidoka. Even as kids, they had accepted a duty to their community, to pass down knowledge onto the next generation. Meanwhile, death was just a part of life. If a bad thing happened, there was nothing you could do about it. You didn't have the luxury of white people rights or objections. The phrase in Japanese is shikata ga nai, which is a polite way of saying shit happens. Decades later, as I grew up in the same community in the 1980s, the sentiment remained all around us. Notable veteran from Go for Broke 442nd, Frank Nishimura, served not just as a local mailman, but my scoutmaster at the Japanese Baptist Church on Yesler and Broadway. And my history buff mom, scanning magazine photos of charred bodies and trees from Japan Airlines Flight 123, would frequently ingeminate to us kids the tale of the atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Growing up Asian in Seattle, we were reminded quite frequently of death. But it wasn't until listening to Cypress Hill in the summer of 1991 that I started thinking death was kind of cool. That summer vacation, Tyler Weigel and I spent time deciphering the lyrics of the Cypress Hill tune, How I Could Just Kill a Man. In the North Seattle suburb of Wedgwood, Jeff Strom and Ben Buckley, wearing puffy starter jackets with big black hoods, shouted at teenagers from nearby Exton Middle School who looked like they were talking shit. "You got the juice, come get it!" Jeff yelled at them from across 35th Avenue. Be Real's lyrics thumped at my ears through foam Walkman headphones. As mischievous 7th graders, Lincoln Webeking and I snuck into a matinee of New Jack City. From the moment I'd spotted that movie's TV trailer, with black gangsters blasting guns at cops, I thought, oh my god, I had to see it. Before then, black cinema was mostly educational or political. Remembering films we watched in school, like Glory or The Power of One, they all showcased at least one white savior teachers could relate to. But not New Jack City. Its poster had Wesley Snipes wearing shades and a Kangol cap, smoking a blunt and holding a Beretta. Yeah. Rap got more violent after New Jack City did $50 million at the box office and Boys in the Hood did $58 million. And it wasn't like rap lyrics weren't explicit or belligerent a lot earlier. I'm not gonna pretend NWA didn't record Dope Man in 87, or Schoolie D didn't do Parkside Killers in 85, but 80s rap was a specialty genre, preaching on racism, the police, and other trials of life and poverty. But in 1992, after the Rodney King riots, rap not only got fiercer, more profane, and more anti-cop, it also got a hell of a lot more popular. Just ask Andrew Dr. Dre Young, who released The Chronic not long after Jeff and I snuck in to see Larry Fishburne in Deep Cover. The movie's title track showcased the first talents of a young Calvin Broadus, who alongside the self-affirmed studio gangster Dre, brought gangster rap to the forefront of mainstream media. And they did it not with the anger or political discord of Chuck D, Ice-T, or other artists who preceded them. They made violence seem like something smooth, laid back, and effortlessly cool. Seattle wasn't a rap town. Well, I take that back. We did have Sir Mix-a-Lot. Long before anyone ever heard about Big Butts, kids in 5th grade listened to Buttermilk Biscuits and Posses on Broadway, even if they only had a dubbed copy of Swass in their tape deck. And unlike some might presume, Seattle wasn't a rock town either. No, it was a jazz town, where Quincy Jones and Ray Charles got started, where Jimi Hendrix strummed his guitar at Garfield High 3 years before my dad enrolled. Black music ran prevalent around South Seattle, with its black community living alongside the same Asian residents who learned to resent them. It wasn't too dissimilar to those Oriental one-penny count motherfuckers Ice Cube hated on in his 1991 track Black Korea. If you're wondering why, just look at Executive Order 9006 of 1942. The second most recent iteration of the Alien Enemies Act put all West Coast residing Japanese into camps. After Pearl Harbor, the US government seized their homes and businesses, reselling them for pennies on the dollar. So when Japanese folks got released 3 years later, they found their neighborhoods claimed and occupied by the poor. And I bet you can guess what other ethnic groups were poor in 1945. Now, you might think that's not fair. So often these days we hear politicians talk about how everything is unfair. But this was the city's socioeconomic reality post-World War II. I grew up in a working-class Asian household alongside many black families. We grew up a mile away from the Holly Park projects, where black kids splashed in the wading pool during the 1 or 2 hot summer days at Van Asselt Playground, which my mother expressly forbade me to visit. As we got older, we listened to black music, ate black food, and listened to immigrant fathers say the N-word in their respective Asian languages. Yet we had a lot in common with our black neighbors. Our dads worked long hours, sometimes at multiple jobs. We distrusted police. Our parents were rarely around, so we learned to take the city bus alone, ride bikes to the library for free books or records, or feel what it was like to have things stolen, or understand why to avoid certain streets. I'm not trying to make an unmerited illustration here, but maybe to the American majority of the time, Asians and blacks were just various forms of human scavenger, scurrying about South King County, fighting each other for scraps. We shared the same street corners and commercial buildings. My mom watched Terrace films at the Toyo Cinema, a Japanese movie house located on Rainier and Orcas in Hamelin City. On the same block we got the transmission fixed on our Buick. There was a black church and a liquor store, just like the LA rappers lamented about in their song lyrics. Backtrack a generation earlier to 1955, and this was the reality into which my dad arrived in America as a 9-year-old boy. Walking home from school each day on Yesler Terrace to Pioneer Square, he became, per my Aunt Masako, the target of ruthless bullying. And I'm not talking about name-calling or cliquish exclusion like we think of today. I'm talking 1955 bullying, where a kid got an unprovoked beatdown. In my dad's case, it was mostly at the hands of black kids on Yesler Way, because not only was he a Jap, he was a Jap who couldn't speak f***ing English. That's why 30 years later, my parents decided against enrolling me or my sister into Van Asselt Elementary next to the Holly Park projects. Instead, they sent us to a Christian school 3.5 miles away, in the stretch of high ground between Rainier Beach and Renton called Skyway. There we connected with 2 other Japanese families, the Dodobaras and the Matsumotos. Carpool duty fell on Louise Matsumoto, a Nissei, second-generation Japanese parent, and congregant of the Japanese Baptist Church. This is also how we learned about Jesus from cranky Asian ladies. Keiko Dodobara didn't drive, but she would invite us over after school. She'd serve pan-fried hot dogs with KC Masterpiece sauce, or handmade onigiri rice balls with dried seaweed while we waited for Mom to pick us up. Dodobara-san's onigiri were always saltier than my mom's. How I loved them. Japanese Baptist Church held Boy Scouts on Friday nights. Troop 53 was, at that time, one of 2 Japanese troops on Yesler Terrace, the other being at the Seattle Betsuin Buddhist Temple a half-mile away. Upon joining, I watched and learned from our Japanese troop leader dads. Black folks would knock on the locked doors of church, seeking a place to pray, and Mr. Matsumoto would shoo them off. Meanwhile, fellow scouts Sean Dodobara and Brian Matsumoto would exchange opinions with me on albums they had purchased. Sean had 2 short dogs in the house. Brian had the DOC's No One Can Do It Better. I was more a Digital Underground fan, but we would talk about these and other rap acts mostly because MTV and radio stations didn't. Rap music had cuss words and got limited airplay, so we shared headphones with each other because we couldn't play our cassettes in the car while the grown-ups were driving. I always found Too Short's music crass, but I could relate to his song The Ghetto and its perspective.
There's only one rule in the real world, and that's
At age 13, I didn't know anyone who did any crime. I mean, apart from the harmless ones my white friends committed. But I could see poverty and despair around me on the streets. On the American stage of the early 1990s, people didn't really associate Asians with crime. But I guess with enough influence and time, anything could happen. At Boy Scouts, we weren't unlike adolescent kids at other troops. Some of us had pimples, some had braces. We brimmed with energy and swear words. We fought and ate like monsters. We'd cap on each other for being fat, for misspeaking words, or for wearing a dumb shirt. We'd call basketball fouls for unnecessary ugliness. And if somebody failed to do something right, we'd call him a disgrace to the race. And that made sense because at our troop almost everyone was Japanese or Chinese. Maybe Laotian. There was one black kid, Lerone Felton, who could beat most of us at sports. And the one white kid, Dan Boothby, relentlessly bullied. It wasn't that we hated white people, it's just that sitting in a room where everyone looked similar, where in the outside world Asians were the other, different from ordinary Americans. For that short 90-minute gathering on a Friday night, we felt like we were normal. Except we were normal 13-year-old boys, acting like we wanted to kill each other. We wrestled, punched, played football, lit firecrackers, tortured small animals. Sean Dodobara even had a violent alter ego, Mr. Fujimoto, who spoke in a menacing 1970s kung fu master voice. We'd be playing like usual, and suddenly his testosterone shifted into high gear. He'd start muttering the Mr. Fujimoto voice, and we'd know he'd gone bye-bye and had now entered destructo mode. But South Seattle was fragmented. Sean lived in Skyway. Brian lived on Beacon Hill, still a mile away from me, and a mile north on Beacon Hill meant passing a lot of black and other non-Japanese Asian houses. Yes, you heard right. Just because a family was Asian didn't mean my mom trusted them. I lived on Warsaw on 24th Avenue, on a cul-de-sac equivalent of 5 houses, 4 of which had Japanese ancestry. Across from my house on Warsaw was a black family whose youngest boy was named Akeem, with whom I was never permitted to play. 24th off Warsaw was a dead end, but had a short trail that led to Holly Street, which had a few Filipinos and exactly 0 Japanese. Just up from Holly was Vista, and Vista was all Chinese, and I mean gold lions on the front porch kind of Chinese. I befriended a kid on Vista once, played at his house, and lent him an NES video game cartridge. I never got the game back, and when I later asked him about it, he explained he'd lent that game to somebody else. My mother scolded me for being dumb enough to trust that kid. I'm not going to say she blamed it on him being Chinese or Filipino, but I do remember her saying something like those parents didn't care about them. Well, at least not enough to teach the etiquette of borrowing things. After all, a Japanese wouldn't dare lose something that was lent to them. Such an offense would dishonor that family's reputation. Mom warned me never to wander off our block again. When I got to Concordia Lutheran in Wedgwood in 1989, I knew I was different from my white classmates. But there was something more than physical appearances. They had a safe neighborhood, other kids on the block to play with, space to ride bikes until the streetlights turned on. Beacon Hill didn't have that, and not surprisingly, the Concordia parents largely agreed. My Wedgwood friends rarely came to South Seattle to play at my house. That 12-mile separation between us felt like an ocean. But this is why I knew black music better than any of my white friends. And not just rap, but soul and R&B, long before Death Row topped the charts in '92. Asians in Seattle were listening to NWA in the 1980s, and New Edition, and Marvin Gaye. Dad was a huge Jackson 5 fan, and there wasn't an Asian dad I knew that didn't love Aretha. What was it about their music they resonated with?
Without a word of warning, the blues walked in this morning and circled around my lonely room. I didn't know why that.
As I settled into the white world of North Seattle, I brought my taste in music with me, and whether I was aware of it or not, I carried with me an ingrained, generational sense of mutually endured plight, way before it got popular when my classmates discovered rap music. I suppose my white friends, listening to those sad songs for the first time, well, I don't know. I guess if you don't understand growing up poor, you might just find the notion of committing crime amusing. Jeff Strom used to call me Russell Nakamura, the last Boy Scout. Well, first because it was mean, but also because of the Bruce Willis Damon Wayans movie. Moreover, he didn't understand the Asians with whom I spent my Friday nights.
It strikes
My white
me
classmates
kinda
didn't see the need.
funny.
What was the point of traveling from disparate parts of town to get together at a church out by the projects? To learn how to tie knots? Of course they didn't get it. They already had everything they needed right there on their own block. In 1992, Sean and Dodobara enrolled at Rainier Beach High School in the largely black neighborhood where as kids Sean and I swam competitively. In 9th grade, Sean had befriended a girl named Missy Fernandez, with whom he shared several classes. And while I learned about grunge at Seattle Prep 12 miles north, Sean and Missy observed their black and Asian schoolmates embrace gangster rap beyond Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, with acts like the Ghetto Boys and Compton's Most Wanted immersing listeners in a world of violence and misogyny. We still did swim team and took periodic camping trips on weekends. His friend group outside of Scouts became less Japanese, as did mine. His became increasingly Filipino, while mine was largely white and a mix of Catholic minorities that grew up in white suburbs. Sean and I watched a lot of the same violent black movies. The newest was Menace to Society, which had an amoral protagonist, and scenes far harsher than New Jack City. The number of drive-by shootings capped at 2, but Menace had a grittiness that made its bloodshed more convincing. I still also like Deep Cover. I knew all the lyrics to its title track because in 1992 I wrote them out by hand to decipher the words.
You already know I give a about a cop, so why in the would you think that it would stop? Plot.
And whether you liked him or not, Snoop Dogg's 20-year-old vocals brimmed with confidence. In high school, the hardest part about being Asian in a white world was building confidence. Unlike the tight-knit Nissei community that embraced my dad when he came to America, I wasn't among many Japanese. In my class, there were only 5. Apart from Scouts, we didn't have a place where we could immediately sit and eat and otherwise connect to a group we could call our tribe. But I could relate to black culture, because for years, blacks were treated lesser than the white majority, and in 1992, their ire was inescapable in the media. While the 80s showcased breakdancers and cute black kids muttering, "What you talking about?" to Conrad Bain on prime time, the 90s black performers had blunts and guns. In defiance of the white majority, they appeared powerful and cool. Sean never wore gangster fashion the way kids in North Seattle did. He was deep in public school where boys in do-rags sported colored bandanas to signify their gang affiliation. The 23rds were the largest Filipino gang in town, while smaller gangs ZSG, Zimang Second Generation, or PIC, Pinoys in Crime, made waves around dance crews and regular troublemakers to size up against larger, more established black gangs of Rainier Valley. I never knew Sean to be violent, well, except for when he was Mr. Fujimoto. At Scouts and within the Asian community, we did service projects together, built fences up in the mountains, crafted igloos on the south slope of Mount Rainier in winter and slept inside them overnight. We got up at 5 a.m. to volunteer at the International District Fair, carved ice blocks with ice picks, sold shave ice for 50 cents a bowl. And we had to tough around white kids because that was the culture of the time. Basic dog psychology. Like Bodhi from Point Break aptly explained, you project strength to avoid conflict. At Scout Summer Camp in 1993, Sean and I wore bandanas and sagging jeans whenever we weren't in uniform. I remember mean mugging white scouts from other troops, daring them to face us in football, calling them scared, and secretly dialoguing aside with Sean in Japanese. Hakujin wa kawaiso ne. I'd flex a bit and add another word, nasakenai. We'd laugh. It was this false sense of superiority, I suppose, that helped us feel safe. No, we weren't fearing for our safety like in Menace to Society, but our Japanese parents were largely absent and couldn't help us navigate the changing American landscape. They merely taught us to watch out for blacks, cops, and other Asians, all while our white counterparts kept us at bay. You can only trust another Japanese, they instructed. The only sense of solidarity we had was with each other. Sean and I found it in Scouts, listening to Dre and Snoop. I only suppose it's what those other Asians who joined 23rd found with their fellow gangsters.
Nigga, what you wanna do? What you wanna do? I got the gauge, a Uzi, and my motherfucking 22. So if you wanna blast, go, we can buck 'em. If we stick 'em, then we stuck 'em. So yeah.
Which brings me back to the tragic death of Amy Davis and Alex Edelstein in May of 1993. After it happened, I had a strange obsession about it. I VHS recorded the interview with Alex's father, David Edelstein, on Como 4 News. I saved clippings from the Seattle Times. "No celebrating at the Seattle Prep Prom," the headline read. This all occurred about the same time Bravo was re-airing the great 90s television show Twin Peaks. I marveled at the way townsfolk mourned the death of homecoming queen Laura Palmer. Kids cried in the middle of class. Mothers and fathers collapsed and wailed during the funeral. I found it captivating. And at 15, I couldn't grasp why Amy and Alex's deaths hit me differently than the shooting outside my bedroom window. Well, it makes perfect sense to me now as an adult. The Japanese word to note here is gaman. There is not an English equivalent. To gaman is not just to accept a hard shake at life. No, gaman is a Japanese cultural value. It means to keep one's self-interest suppressed while still moving forward. During the 80s and 90s, if you were a Japanese kid in the Asian community of South Seattle, you were taught of hard knocks and the risk of death at a young age. You were exposed to adversity among people of color, and you ultimately learned to suck it up and move forward. On the contrary, when white kids died, it was tragic, because tragedy in white communities isn't expected. White kids weren't supposed to die. They had dreams and aspirations, and their destinies were robbed from them. Amy and Alex were supposed to go to football games, attend dances, get summer jobs lifeguarding, or take their dad's boat out on Newport shores, make plans for college in the future. Teenage heartbreaks might be part of the forecast. Fatal accidents? Never. And yet despite those awkward years, the insecurity, the rage, the gangster clothes, grunge clothes, and frustrations of not fitting in, I still believed righteousness was meant to prevail. Despite everything, the world was supposed to make sense, and people would mourn you the way Leland Palmer embraced his daughter Laura after she died. That was the point of The Last Boy Scout, after all, for those of us who bothered to watch that movie all the way through. You have to fight for what's right, even when your team is losing. In March of 1994, Sean and I were sophomores in high school. It was the drizzly time of year in Seattle, before daylight savings. We left for school in the morning while it was still dark, and as the day ended, the sun would set again before we even returned back home. March 24th was a Wednesday. Across the country, a mid-air collision in North Carolina killed 24 members of the U.S. Army at Pope Field. On the other side of the globe, Aeroflot Flight 593 crashed in the Kuznets Mountains in Russia. Just after lunch at Ballard High School, students stood waiting outside for class to begin. Among them was Missy Fernandez, who had transferred from Rainier Beach. Sean explained Missy had left South Seattle for the suburban school in the Northeast because of Rainier Beach's growing gang problem. A few moments before the school bell rang, a vehicle containing 3 Asian teenagers, Jerome Reyes, Cesar Sarasad, and Brian Ronquillo, drove at medium speed. They were members of 23rd, aiming for a rival gang, BSP, Bad Side Posse. Ronquillo fired 8 times out the window of the crowd before the car sped away. A bullet struck Missy in the head, killing her instantly. In 2014, Brian Ronquillo popped up in the Seattle Times again. He was back in court, now 36, married, and appealing his sentence. Ronquillo's attorneys argued he was a model inmate. He had finished his GED and had worked to educate other prisoners in the system. You know, like a good Asian. They argued his sentence was excessive for a 16-year-old with no previous criminal history. The judge denied his request. Louise Matsumoto, Brian's mom, attended my dad's funeral this January 2025. We shared a few laughs about our elementary school days at the Japanese Baptist church. As we chatted, I watched as my kids overloaded their plates of funeral home hors d'oeuvres, and I commented to Louise about how she and other Japanese ladies used to scold us for wasting food. You know, that's because after the war, we didn't have anything, Louise added with a grin. Just last month I ran into Sean's father, Mr. Doug Dodobara, who still lives at his home in Skyway. Regretfully, he shared that Keiko, Sean's mom, recently had moved into an assisted living facility. Later, in the summer of 2025, I took my wife and kids to the Bonodori Festival at the Seattle Betsuin, near 14th and Jackson. When I was a kid, Bonodori was the place you could always count on seeing people from the community, young and old. Even folks from the Japanese Baptist Church a half-mile away came to gather there in the warmth of summer as one larger people. But this was still Yesler Terrace, so conventional wisdom I'd learned from my parents had me watching out for black people. I reminded myself to park somewhere safe, maybe where my grandmother had lived, or the Kawabe House retirement home, to be on guard for vagrants or drunk people, and to lock our car. We arrived at the event at Wisteria Park in South Main. I bought my boys shave ice, telling them how I used to cut the ice with saws and picks, and poured on colorful flavors in the same manner when I was a boy. We stopped at the Scouts table, which displayed the history of Troop 252, the other Japanese troop in town. Founded in 1948, the all-Japanese Boy Scouts carried cultural traditions into American Scouting, hosting hundreds of boys, including my own father in 1958. We ate somen, dressed in yukata kimonos. I kept alert, looking around to see if I recognized anybody from my scouting days. The crowd didn't look the way it did in 1992. Most attendees were of mixed race: whites, blacks, Hispanics, Africans, Southeast Asians. I had to remind myself the Nissei I knew in my youth had arrived at the turn of the century, or the 1920s. A lot of them had passed away now. I walked through the old gym, where in 2001 my grandmother had her funeral service, where my uncle Sam Uchida once had his army photo from Korea on display. I walked past the sanctuary, where at least 2 of my cousins were married. As the sunset cast rays across the downtown skyline, I strolled down the alleyway toward the Densho building, where the Obon always had its beer garden where they sold grilled onigiri. I sat there with my wife and kids, chewing on a few snacks. The taiko drumming settled as the last of the traditional Japanese songs faded in echoes from the loudspeaker. I didn't encounter a single soul I knew from the past. It was almost as though nearly all traces of the Japanese community of my father and the traditions I had known of Seattle in the 1990s had vanished